We begin in the year 1973, a time when the small town of Mims, Florida, seemed to breathe the enthusiasm of school competitions and the vibrant energy of youth. At the center of this scene is May Roberts, a young woman whose talent and beauty have elevated her to the position of head cheerleader at Mims High School. May is at the top of her game, commanding a complex choreography under the bright lights of the gym, surrounded by the rhythmic sound of applause and the crowd's expectation. In a crucial moment of the performance, she is thrown into the air by her peers in an ambitious acrobatic leap. However, what should have been the pinnacle of the night turns into a visual nightmare. At the height of the jump, time seems to suffer a dreamlike distortion. May reaches an impossible height, and instead of returning to the ground, she floats for a moment in a silent and terrifying void. The subsequent fall is devastating. She crashes through the wooden structure of the stage, her body colliding with the ground with a violence that results in an exposed fracture in her leg. The horror, however, does not end with physical pain. May awakens from a traumatic trance only to emit a horrifying scream upon realizing she is without her eyes. The viewer observes the grotesque detail of her eyeballs falling into a glass cup, symbolizing the definitive loss of her vision and the beginning of a curse that would last for decades. The story then jumps 50 years to the present, shifting the setting from school euphoria to the urban melancholy of New York City. Anna, a teenager marked by deep sadness, prepares for a forced move after the tragic loss of her parents. Without any other relatives in the big city, she is sent to rural Florida, to the same house where her grandmother, the now elderly and blind May Roberts, lives in absolute isolation. Upon arrival, Anna is greeted by May with hospitality that borders on excessive, an attempt at human warmth that contrasts with the cold and mysterious atmosphere of the residence. May presents the house with tactile precision, describing each piece of furniture and room, but the mood changes when Anna points to a photograph on the wall. The image, which seems to be from a dance night, awakens an evasive response in May. She claims not to remember the details and mentions that she did not stay at the event until the end, suggesting that this was the breaking point in her life. Tension escalates when May establishes privacy boundaries, pointing out her own room as strictly forbidden territory. She makes it clear, without using direct words, that Anna's access to her personal sanctuary is something she will not tolerate. Anna retreats to her new room, a space she tries to make her own while dealing with grief, organizing photographs of her parents and trying to connect with the environment through her own camera. Photography is her hobby and her way of observing the world, a cruel irony given her grandmother's condition. The isolation of the property is broken the next day by the arrival of Patty, May's sister, a woman who bears a deep and visible scar on her face, a stigma that seems to tell its own story of pain. Patty recognizes Anna and tries to be friendly, but her posture becomes rigid and nervous upon hearing May's voice echoing through the house. The relationship between the two sisters is described as a minefield of unresolved traumas, where even the sound of each other's voice can cause physical discomfort. Curious about her surroundings, Anna questions May about what lies beyond the dense forest surrounding the house. The grandmother's response is a warning laden with foreboding. She mentions the existence of a river, but sternly warns Anna not to go there, claiming that the forest holds dangers that a city girl would not be able to comprehend. Driven by a melancholic rebellion, Anna ignores the warning the next day. She walks among the moss-covered trees until she reaches a wooden pier on the edge of a placid lake. There, she crosses paths with Julie and Sean, two youths who embody the boredom and neglect of that rural area. In a long conversation on a boat, the trio shares their losses. Anna talks about her parents' death, while discovering that Sean also lost his father and never knew his mother. Julie and Sean, who have already dropped out of school, seem to live in a limbo of lack of perspective, something that resonates with Anna's emotional state. On the way back, Anna's exploration leads her to a disturbing discovery, a majestic and twisted tree that bears the name May Roberts, deeply carved into its trunk. Anna photographs the carving, feeling that the tree is a guardian of secrets her grandmother tries to hide. Upon returning home, May's instinct immediately captures the smell of the forest on Anna. May's displeasure is evident in her tense expression, and she retreats to her forbidden room under Anna's watchful gaze. Through the keyhole, Anna observes May in obsessive behavior near the bed, seeming to bury or dig something with urgency. When May suddenly leaves the room, Anna barely has time to retreat, remaining still in the hallway while the blind grandmother sniffs the air, trying to detect her presence in a way reminiscent of an alert predator. The search for answers leads Anna to a school yearbook from 1973, where the absence of May's photo and a cruel poem written by Patty reveal the cracks in the family's history. Patty, in a later meeting, describes May as a beautiful but wicked and cunning woman who had her sight stolen by Mr. Sandman as punishment for her actions. Patty explains that May went mad due to violent dreams before losing her eyes and discovering her daughter's pregnancy. As the legend of Sandman takes shape, Anna goes out again with Sean and Julie. What should have been a moment of youthful fun between alcohol and Instagram photos ends in a cowardly act of violence against Connor, a boy on roller skates. Anna watches in horror as Sean pushes the boy off a cliff, causing him a terrible fracture in his arm. After Sean threatens Connor and abandons him, Anna decides to stay to help him, taking him to the hospital while her companions flee. That night, Patty has a private conversation with the boy, and seeing his pain, whispers to him the secret of the tree. She claims that the justice of Sandman can be invoked through the carving of names. Connor, driven by hatred, carves the names of Julie, Sean, and Anna into the sacred wood. With the names of Julie, Sean, and Anna deeply carved into the trunk of the sacred tree, the balance between the real world and the spiritual realm of Vincent is shattered permanently. In the oppressive silence of May Roberts' house, unintelligible whispers begin to fill the cracks in the walls, as if the very structure of the residence is trying to communicate an ancient danger. Anna, exhausted from the trauma of witnessing the attack on Connor and the solitary walk back from the hospital, falls into a heavy sleep that quickly transforms into a sensory trap. Soon, a mystical hourglass is observed, whose grains of black sand begin to fall, marking the start of the time for the dam's atonement. Sandman, the vengeful entity, infiltrates Anna's mind, subjecting her to fragmented visions of blindness and pain, from which she awakens with the terrifying sensation that something has been permanently altered in her perception. At dawn, May Roberts' behavior becomes even more enigmatic and disturbing. Even deprived of sight, she seems to sense the change in the forest's vibration. She feels the awakening of Sandman as a familiar chill running down her spine. In an act of ancestral precaution, May takes a ball of red thread, tying one end to the porch and taking the rest with her into the forest, using the thread as an umbilical cord to connect her back to the safety of home. She walks to the tree of names, feeling the wood with trembling hands until she finds the new marks of hatred left by Connor. May's expression is not just fear, but a resigned acceptance that the cycle of violence she tried to bury is returning to exact its price. Meanwhile, Anna tries to seek a moment of normalcy at the pier, using her headphones to drown out the sounds of nature that now feel threatening. The tranquility is shattered by the sudden arrival of Sean. He appears with renewed aggression, driven by an inner restlessness he cannot explain. Without giving explanations, he confiscates Anna's bag, throws it into his vehicle, and demands that she gets in. Anna tries to resist, but Sean's intimidating physical presence and erratic behavior force her to comply. What follows is a sequence of terror on the back roads of Florida. Sean drives at a suicidal speed, ignoring Anna's pleas as she watches the trees pass by like dark green blurs. In a surge of emotional instability, Sean lets go of the steering wheel with both hands, allowing the car to swerve dangerously as tears of pure panic stream down his face. Anna seems to see visions that he cannot. Anna is forced to act quickly, grabbing the steering wheel to avoid collisions. After a violent and accusatory argument, Sean slams on the brakes and orders Anna out, abandoning her in the middle of the road. Alone and gasping for breath, she walks to a small convenience store where fate prepares a symbolic encounter. Inside the store, Anna comes across a blind man whose presence serves as a living reminder of her grandmother's fate. Connor is also there, trying to buy a pair of roller skates, a desire to regain the mobility and joy that Sean tried to take from him. Realizing that the boy does not have enough money, Anna intervenes and pays the difference. She tries, with choked words, to apologize for her cowardice in witnessing his assault without intervening. Connor, however, remains impenetrable. He accepts the skates but rejects the forgiveness, leaving the store without casting a single glance at the girl, making it clear that financial restitution does not cleanse the stain of complicity. The night brings with it the intensification of nightmarish attacks. In May Roberts' room, Anna dreams of a blind boy who points at her in silent accusation. Suddenly, a figure identical to Anna emerges from the shadows of the dream, confronting her with the question she fears the most. Why didn't she do anything? Anna's double, representing her wounded conscience, advances and tears the girl's tongue out, a metaphoric punishment for her silence during the bullying against the boy. Simultaneously, Sean experiences his own private hell. In a deserted playground, he is pursued by invisible forces. A swing moves frantically with no one on it, and his beer is thrown to the ground, just like he is. In horror, he runs home. The next day, Julie is in a pool where the water turns into a sea of floating eyeballs, and a hidden force pulls her into the depths, but fortunately, this does not mean the end for the young girl. Meanwhile, Anna's unconscious visions begin to meld with her reality. She then returns to the tree in the forest and confirms what she feared the most. The names of Julie, Sean, and her own are carved into the bark, sealing the blood pact with Sandman. She observes May, who is crouching at the base of the trunk, collecting the black and viscous mud that seems to ooze from the tree's roots, saving the material in a bottle for a sinister purpose. Anna photographs her grandmother's ritual and rushes to Julie's house, showing her the evidence and revealing the connection between the tree, the names, and May's loss of vision. Julie confesses that she is also being haunted by visions of a boy without eyes, but her denial and fear prevent her from accepting the gravity of the situation. Determined to fight against fate, Anna grabs an axe and enters the forest at night to chop down the cursed tree. The physical effort is superhuman, and she ends up collapsing from exhaustion in front of the trunk. It is in this state of vulnerability that she receives the full vision of Vincent's tragedy. She sees the blind boy with glass eyes being taken into the woods by two school bullies who remove his ocular prosthetics and use them as slingshot ammunition against Vincent's own head, killing him and leaving his body to be absorbed by the tree's roots. Anna awakens on the pier the next morning, confused and surrounded by Sean and Julie. Sean, in an act of absolute disdain for the entity pursuing him, commits the sacrilege of urinating on the tree. Then, the instant manifestation of Sandman's justice is enacted. The entity emerges from the shadows behind Sean and, with a sharp motion, tears out his eyes. Sean screams in agony, running blindly until he fatally collides with a trunk while Sandman consumes his flesh tribute. The brutal murder of Sean under Sandman's grasp leaves a trail of horror that Anna's words can no longer describe. Fear is now a physical and constant companion. Anna and Julie, united by visceral terror, seek refuge in the only fortress they know, May Roberts' house, believing that physical proximity can protect them from the entity's incursions. They decide to sleep together, transforming the room into an improvised sanctuary where they recite spells and protection chants, desperately trying to erect a mystical barrier against Vincent's spirit, but the fragility of this defense is evident. As the young women whisper words of hope, Sandman recognizes no limits of flesh or wood, infiltrating their minds the moment exhaustion triumphs over vigilance. The two simultaneously plunge into a shared dream, a dreamlike dimension where the laws of physics and logic of MIMS are replaced by the will of the entity. Within this collective nightmare, Julie enters a state of profound infantile denial, playing with the water of a fountain as if she could wash away the stain of her complicity. Meanwhile, Anna walks toward the epicenter of the curse. She sees herself before the Tree of Eyes, performing the symbolic and disturbing act of pulling an eyeball from her own mouth. This vision serves as a portent of what is to come, a harvest of flesh that Vincent demands to balance the scales of justice that were corrupted decades ago. Upon awakening, the transition to reality does not bring relief, but introduces a new kind of betrayal, domestic betrayal. May Roberts, the grandmother whose blindness seems to have sharpened a predatory survival instinct, moves through the kitchen preparing breakfast. After taking the sedative mixed in her coffee, Anna collapses to the ground. May firmly believes that to save her own soul from Vincent's eternal pursuit, she must offer her granddaughter as a substitute sacrifice. She loses consciousness in May's arms, who carries her up the stairs to the sealed room with the black viscous mud collected from the tree. While Anna is immobilized upstairs, Julie wakes up downstairs, feeling an unbearable pressure and a burning under her eyelids, as if hot sand is being poured into her eyeballs. Disoriented, she heads to the bathroom, believing that contact with cold water will dispel the nightmare that has become physical. The invisible hourglass of black sand runs out of its last grain, just as Julie plunges into the bathtub water. The manifestation of Sandman in the confined space of the bathroom is silent and relentless. Julie tries to scream, but panic freezes her throat as fingers that feel like icy needles grip her face. In an act mirroring the cruelty endured by Vincent in childhood, the entity swiftly removes one of Julie's eyes with surgical precision. The agony causes Julie to lose her balance, and in her desperate attempt at escape, she slips and strikes her head fatally, losing her life. With her death, Sandman retreats into the shadows, leaving behind a lifeless body and a debt partially paid. Far from the scene of Julie's death, May Roberts completes the preparations for what she believes to be the final act of her redemption. In the room whose walls now exude the smell of damp earth and decay from the forest, she ties Anna's arms and legs with reinforced ropes, transforming the bed into an altar of sacrifice. May begins to whisper Vincent's name into the emptiness of the room, treating the entity as a long-awaited guest. She is convinced that Sandman has come to claim the bloodline started with her own tragedy in 1973, and that by giving Anna's eyes, she will finally see the end of her torment. Anna, however, is not completely lost in the drug's stupor. In a semi-conscious state, she receives one last and crucial message from the dream world. To escape Sandman, fighting is not enough. Equivalent compensation must be offered. The vision makes it clear that she must replicate in herself the pain Connor suffered for the scales of justice to be balanced. When Anna finally opens her eyes, she finds May hovering over her, holding a pair of sharp, gleaming scissors. The grandmother begins her attack, driven by a madness that mixes self-preservation and devotion to the monster she herself helped create. Anna struggles to free one of her wrists from the bindings while the scissor blades approach her vision. Anna manages, in a surge of adrenaline, to free one of her hands from the restraints and strikes May with a bottle, buying herself precious seconds. She screams at her grandmother, trying to make her understand that Sandman did not come for her, but for the youths, whose names Connor carved into the sacred tree. During the physical confrontation on the bedroom floor, the scissors become the weapon of fate. In an instinctive defensive move, Anna strikes May in the eye with the blade, leaving the elderly woman unconscious and temporarily ending the assault. Driven by a dark determination to balance Vincent's scales of justice, and knowing that Sean's and Julie's deaths were not enough to purge her own omission, she grabs a hammer and with a sharp and brutal blow, breaks her own arm, replicating the exposed fracture Connor suffered on the cliff. At the moment the bone snaps, the supernatural pressure on her eyes disappears instantly, signaling that the entity has accepted the atonement. Meanwhile, May's sister Patty arrives at the house and faces the scene of carnage. She finds May unconscious, but the elderly woman is only pretending to be dead, waiting for Patty to come close enough. The final confrontation between the sisters reveals the depth of familial rancor. May accuses Patty of being the true villain, the envious person who carved her name into the tree decades ago, sealing her fate in 1973. In a fit of blind rage, May grabs Patty and stabs her in the eye with the scissors, calling her envious before they both tumble down the stairs. Patty dies from the impact of the fall and the wound, and May succumbs as well, leaving the Roberts lineage in ruins. On the spiritual plane, Anna performs the final act of the ritual. She offers Sandman the two symbolic eyeballs that appeared in her dream, delivering them to Vincent as the final payment of a blood debt that has spanned generations. The entity, now satisfied both by Anna's voluntary sacrifice and the deaths of the original culprits, dissolves into the shadows, allowing the curse to sleep once more in the roots of the tree. The story concludes with the dawn over the pier of Mims. Anna awakens and realizes that her vision remains intact, a miracle granted by her courage in facing her own guilt. Though wounded and forever marked by tragedy, she is the sole survivor of a cycle of horror that has finally been interrupted.